All right, everyone, let's talk about Age of Calamity and why I ended up kind of disappointed with it.
HJ Review.
All right, there's a lot to unpack with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And just to give you some context, my expectations were very high, which is probably the first problem with this review. Never set your expectations high because you can only go down from there. But I loved Breath of the Wild. I loved Hyrule Warriors, and I was addicted to both games for their own reasons. And Hyrule Warriors was really the first Warriors, I'm going to call it a Warriors game, that I really fell into. So when I heard that Age of Calamity was taking both of these games and putting it together into something, I could only imagine it being the sum of their parts or better. But for some reason, putting these two together made it less of an experience than the original sources. And we're going to dive into that. I want to start with pretty much dissecting every piece, saying what I love, what I didn't like. We're not going to get too much into spoilers because honestly, let's get into the story right away. It's very lackluster in my opinion. And Breath of the Wild was never really known for its story. So in some senses, and neither was Hyrule Warriors for that matter. But here there was kind of a lot of promise that this was the lore that would help give Breath of the Wild a little bit more of a leg up in that lore section, because a lot of people did say Breath of the Wild did not have enough lore really in it, like the other Zelda games. But here, it's the Calamity. We are going to talk a little bit about spoilers, not so much talking about what happens, but just inferring that I've played the story. There might be some spoilers. So if you don't want anything spoiled, actually, I'll put a marker when I'm done talking about the story and you can skip to that. So the story is basically a fresh take on how the Calamity goes down in this world of Hyrule. And it's very piecemeal of just go here, go here, go here. Nothing really feels like it blends together. It's just Zelda and company saying, we need to go get the next shiny thing to destroy Ganon. Oh no, Ganon is here. And then everyone kind of falls back and then regathers together to fight him. It's a story to move things along, but I was never like, what's going to happen next? I didn't care about the new characters they've added in. And to that matter, it made me realize that because Breath of the Wild is so much about exploring and getting lost in this world, it could have almost been any world. It didn't even have to be a Zelda universe game. The characters that are in Age of Calamity, I don't really care for them. This version of Zelda, first of all, is not my favorite. She is very, one of my friends calls her breathy. Like, she always sounds so exhausted and breathy. And I get it's a princess with a lot on her shoulders and she's dealing with a lot. But if you look at all the other Zeldas, I find this one a little bit annoying. She's very damsel in distress type Zelda in some senses. And I way preferred the Zelda in Hyrule Warriors. Link's fine. I have no problem with him. But then all the other characters, like the Guardians, the Champions, they weren't really fleshed out in Breath of the Wild because they were more they weren't fully fleshed out characters. They were never meant to be. They were just characters that are part of a greater story to give you backstory of what happened in this land that you're kind of unearthing as you explore. So to be able to play as them, I didn't have any emotional connection to all of them. And in Age of Calamity, it's not like they go through any kind of character arc or development. And it's kind of weird because you could say in Hyrule Warriors, the original, there's Lana in there, who's a new character that was added specifically for that, or Linkle. But I found those characters interesting. I actually kind of cared about them. They weren't, the best. I cared about all the other characters I played in the other Zelda games more. But Lana, Linkle, I didn't really like the sorceress. Even the villains in that game were more interesting than any of the characters they threw in Age of Calamity. And that might just be my own personal thing about not really enjoying maybe I just don't enjoy characters from the Breath of the Wild franchise. Like the Zoras were kind of interesting in Age of Calamity. And then maybe that's pretty much it. Everyone else, I could care less for. I didn't want to necessarily, in fact, I didn't want to play with him. I played as Link throughout most of the story. I like Link's moveset, and I like just Link. I like that you can customize his outfit. So it was really just a game of playing Link through a story that I already kind of knew what was going to happen and that had no real pull on me. Done with spoilers. All right. That said, So that's why I was really disappointed. But if we actually get into the good parts of this game, so the combat aspect, they really took combat to a whole other level, which it's good if you want that. But there was something very pleasant about the monotonous hack and slash of Hyrule Warriors where I could just kind of relax on the couch and just destroy hordes of enemies by entering my combos that I've memorized. In this game, every character plays very differently. So if you're really into learning how to create these different combos and these different mechanics, this game is a lot better to give you a very fleshed out set of moves to just explore and see what you can do with. I feel the combat in this game a lot deeper. When it comes to combat with mobs, it's not as important. I feel there's a lot more attention and focus in fighting the mini bosses or the bosses in this game. So like in the original Hyrule Warriors, you're often just slaying mobs and capturing keeps and kind of trying to keep that pressure on who has the most keeps and doing what. Now that's how I describe the original Hyrule Warriors. A lot of strategic planning on where your troops are, capturing keeps, and then defeating bosses as they pop up. Age of Calamity feels more, there's a lot less importance on mob clearing and on keep capturing compared to the first one. In fact, the mobs are a lot smaller. I'll often finish a level with maybe 300 to 500 enemies killed, whereas in the original Hyrule Warriors, it was always 2,000 to 10,000 enemies killed in a single level. So back to fighting the bosses. The bosses were a lot harder. I felt their moveset had a lot more depth than Hyrule Warriors. So if you really like that kind of one-on-one combat, here it's more of that. And they did a great job at mixing what Breath of the Wild is, what the combat was there with a Hyrule Warriors game, and creating that unique experience. But again, here the bosses, they kind of get a little generic to my taste. There's a good variety, but for lack of a better word for it, they eventually start palette swapping. It's not quite a palette swap, but for example, you will have a Moblin, and then you will have the blue Moblin, and then the black Moblin, and then you have the ice Moblin, and then you have the thunder Moblin. So you know, every enemy, maybe there's 5 enemies, but then there's like 10 variations of that enemy. It gets a little bit boring to fight. You could say the same thing about the original Hyrule Warriors that just had like 4 or 5 bosses, but I felt you spent more time fighting the other warriors. In this one, you don't really fight the other characters. So it's a little bit of a different flavor. I preferred Hyrule Warriors. I recognize there's more depth in combat in Age of Calamity. Now, in terms of all the extra stuff, I was really worried how they would give me kind of like, oh, I just want to play like one more level, because I was obsessed with the maps in Hyrule Warriors and trying to unlock the whole map and just moving around and strategizing on what's the next best thing to do. Here they do the same thing where you have all of these quests and side missions across the map, and they just keep popping up, and sometimes you do one and another one will pop up somewhere else. I love that. I love what they did there. I love that there's a bunch of stuff. Once the story ends, there's a few more things that you can collect. I want to 100% this game, so they have done a good job at making me want to like play all this extra content. However, it's not as addictive for me, and that comes back to the gameplay and what I like to do. It's just, you know, you're going to keep going back into the same levels, fighting the same bosses, and really the mobs are just there to kind of like boost up your special. So when I describe it, I know it sounds the same as Hyrule Warriors, but it feels different. And that's the hardest thing that is there to communicate. It's just less fun for me in Age of Calamity. I do like the fact that they have Koroks now. So in Hyrule Warriors, you have the gold Skulltulas. Here you have the Koroks. I actually did one level that I went back specifically to search for the Koroks. I enjoy that. I enjoy that sort of stuff where there's a little bit of another thing that you can do in there. Oh, maps. Let's talk about the maps. Age of Calamity did a fantastic job of recreating the world that we saw in Breath of the Wild. I'm pretty sure it's to a T. So if you saw an area in Breath of the Wild, I think it's recreated 1-to-1 in Age of Calamity. Fantastic. However, Breath of the Wild was not designed to be a Warriors game. So the maps, I do not like the maps. In Hyrule Warriors, the maps were very well laid out with keeps very clear where they were, very well distributed. And in Age of Calamity, the maps feel so small, tight. I had a lot of camera issues when I'm dodging enemies. I'm constantly bouncing off a rock or a wall because there's a jump off a wall mechanic. The maps were not really fun to move around. I got to learn the maps in Hyrule Warriors. I got to memorize them and understood where I needed to be, where I had to go, where the gold skulltulas would spawn, what I needed to maintain to keep the balance. In Age of Calamity, I honestly had no idea often where I was going. Sometimes it was confusing, especially the ones that have like a lot of height and they have a lot of levels that you have to deal with. You look at your 2D map and it's kind of hard to understand, okay, where is the bridge that takes me to level 2 and how do I get down now to the basement floor of this level? It was not fun to navigate, and I don't like that. There was also the interface as a whole, and there's this fantastic video I saw on I forget their channel, but I'm going to link them here. And they dissected Hyrule Warriors and why the interface was terrible. As a UI, it just failed so many design things. And I'm not sure what that person's take is on Age of Calamity, but I felt Age of Calamity's UI was even worse. So in Hyrule Warriors, you always have all these alerts going off. There's someone talking to you. There's an alert going on here. There's an alert. It's overwhelming. Here, it's so subtle. There was so much stuff going on in the combat. I was actually missing the prompts, missing a lot of what the dialogue was with the characters, and missing the context of what was going on in the mission. And the map was hard to interpret, as I mentioned earlier, because of the whole level. So overall, the UI felt a lot worse when you are in game. The UI is the same as Breath of the Wild when you're outside of a battle, and it's beautiful. I didn't really like the UI when you are doing your weapon upgrade. I felt that was better in the original Hyrule Warriors. Here was a step back. I didn't really even fully grasp what the whole fusion bonuses are. I just ended up just fusing everything. Whereas in Hyrule Warriors, it was very easy. It's like, oh, you want this skill on that weapon, you take this as your base and you fuse that. Boom, there you go. You picked your skill. It just seemed more intuitive. So another con there. And then finally, there's a lot of conversations around the technical aspect of this game, frame rate. A lot of people are saying frame rate is dropping. Honestly, I've put in maybe 25 hours into the game. I've never really experienced anything where I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Except once when I was in 2-player mode and both of our screens had a lot of stuff going on at the same time. That's when the gameplay actually slowed down. I assume that's what low frame rate is. Other than that, though, I enjoyed my experience in the sense that I didn't really have any technical hurdles through the game. I was just oftentimes bored playing this of, who's this character? Why do I care? I don't want to play as this character. I hate this map. What's going on? I can't read the UI. That's what I was experiencing most of the time. And as much as I really wanted to enjoy this and have a lot of fun with it, I have to put the fact that it's a Zelda game aside. I have to put the fact that it's a Hyrule Warriors game aside, the fact that it's in the Breath of the Wild universe aside, and just look at it as a very mediocre game where it did make some breakthroughs and some advancements in, the combat. It perfectly captured the essence of both franchises, the Hyrule Warriors and the Breath of the Wild. But at the end, I didn't have as much fun as I wanted with it. Like, would I play it again? Yes. Can I recommend it as this is a must-play Switch game? It's very hard. No, I cannot recommend it, because even if you're big into Zelda, I can't even say, play it for the lore, because I don't think the lore is that interesting either here. So I know that's kind of like a bummer to hear. It's a bummer to say. I really want to love this game, but it's just a good game. I wish I could say it's great, but I can't. I know a lot of you will disagree with that, but sound off in the comments below what you think, what you loved about it, what maybe didn't hit the mark for you. And I'll see you on the next Hey J review. Keep it classy.